well-regulated militia be necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. I am so glad you joined us on the program today. Now, listen, I want to give you a little bit of a heads up. Coming up on tomorrow's program, we are going to be talking about the ATF's new proposed rule on stabilizing braces. The rule that could turn millions of gun owners into felons overnight. Alex Bosco of SP Tactical is going to be with us on the program. I've had a number of folks ask some questions about the public comment, both for the stabilizing brace issue, as well as for the public comment period regarding redefining frames, receivers, even the word readily under the Gun Control Act of 1968. So we're going to talk about the public comment process on tomorrow's Cam and Company, as well as you how to ensure that your comment is received and is heard, whether or not the Biden administration actually pays any attention to that. That's another story altogether. But today we're going to be talking about the continued freak out on the left over the decision by Judge Roger Benitez striking down California's so-called assault weapons ban. This decision came down last Friday, and the left is still losing its ever-loving mind over this decision because they know that if this decision is upheld, one of their, gun ban tenets of faith goes away. They truly do believe, many of them, that we could simply ban these scary black rifles, that mass shootings would stop overnight, even though the evidence shows that those types of killers more often use handguns in the commission of those heinous crimes. It's not about banning hardware. And Judge Benitez even said that. The idea of trying to reduce violent crime by banning firearms is absolutely absurd, particularly when there are really effective ways to reduce violent crime, including those who would perpetrate active assailant attacks with the intention of harming or killing as many people as possible. The left doesn't want to hear it. It is a matter of faith to gun control advocates that we can ban our way to safety. Case in point, a writer for the Los Angeles Times, Virginia Heffernan, who is a PhD, by the way. She describes herself on Twitter as a columnist for the LA Times, Wired, 1843 magazine, late of the Real Trump Cast, who I bet that was a pleasure to listen to, the New York Times, PhD, for what it's worth, she says. Well, I'm sure she paid a lot for the degree. Not really sure she got her money's worth. Heffernan is opining about the assault weapons ban decision handed down by Judge Benitez. Now, keep in mind, that decision has been stayed. So the assault weapons ban, quote-unquote assault weapons ban in California, is actually still in place right now. But again, the left knows what is at stake here ultimately. And it has unleashed a tsunami of awful, unconstitutional, ineffective, and downright ridiculous ideas from the minds of the gun control advocates as they contemplate a future in which they can't ban the most commonly sold rifle in America today. So Heffernan had a little bit of a Twitter thread a couple of days ago. Real estate listings, he said, should include the prevalence of gun ownership in a 50-mile radius and the number of annual mass shootings in the region. Time to change what a bad neighborhood is, she says. All right, well, first of all, Virginia, keep in mind that in the vast majority of states around the country, gun ownership isn't registered by the state. So where I live in Virginia, for example, I don't register my handguns. I don't register my rifles or my shotguns. The state of Virginia has no idea who owns a firearm. So there's no way to put that plan in place. Even if it were to be upheld by a court of law, which I don't think it would be, it's impossible to do so without imposing nationwide gun registration. And guess what's not going to happen? Imposing nationwide gun registration. Virginia Heffernan says as well, we need to introduce a meaningful tax on guns and gun violence. No one should say, quote, this is a great place to raise kids about neighborhoods where even one person has an assault rifle. Okay, so again, we're using made-up words like assault rifle. I think what Virginia Heffernan was talking about, like AR-15s, modern sporting rifles, in which case she's probably going to be absolutely terrified to leave the house when she finds out that even in California, more than 100,000 quote-unquote featureless rifles were sold in the state last year, that these firearms are more common, as Judge Benitez pointed out, than Ford F-150 pickup trucks. Again, if Heffernan actually realizes this, she may never leave her house again, but that is the reality of the situation. And you might have noticed that despite the fact that AR-15s are more common than Ford F-150s, we're not living in some horrible dystopian future where roving gangs of marauding barbarians are targeting neighborhoods with their AR-15. No, we don't have that. Violent crime is going up in this country right now, which is bad enough, but it's not because of legal gun owners or the firearms that they own. But we'll get into that as well, because Heffernan, in addition, before we move on to her next tweet, let's talk about her idea for a, quote, meaningful tax on guns and gun violence. Or about San Jose Mayor Sam Liccardo's plan to charge gun owners a fee in San Jose, as well as require them to carry liability insurance. I mean, I'm sure Virginia would love that idea, right? Oh, that's meaningful. Except it's not. The Supreme Court ruled back in 1943 that you cannot impose a fee on the exercise of a constitutional right. So already Virginia's, with her PhD and all, already she's outside of the bounds of what the Supreme Court has said. More importantly, whether or not Virginia Heffernan realizes this or not, her plans to impose a, quote, meaningful tax on guns would inevitably fall hardest on lower-income Americans. So Jeff Bezos, for instance, not going to be bothered by a tax on guns and ammunition, but a single mom living in South L.A. who'd like to protect herself and her kids may very well find herself priced out of a right because of Virginia's not-so-bright idea. Heffernan then says, quote, the metric would be simple. Example, Staten Island. Population 474,000, has 4 times the gun ownership per capita of the Bronx, population 1.4 million. If that reads as safer or more freer to some people, freer, I guess is what that meant. I don't know. Staten Island is for them. If not, maybe time for the Bronx. Take race, class, politics out of the real estate equation. Okay, let's do that. I don't think Heffernan actually checked the statistics before she compared Staten Island to the Bronx. I did, and here's what I found. This is from neighborhoodscout.com. Bronx crime data. Okay, so you see there the crime index for the Bronx is 19 out of 100. 100 being the safest, 0 being the least safe. The Bronx is at 19. Safer than 19% of U.S. cities. Now, those are the raw numbers of crimes that you're seeing here on that top level here. Violent crimes, 12,159 violent crimes in the Bronx last year. Crime rate per 1,000 residents is 8.57. 8.57 per 1,000 residents. We measure homicides, by the way, in 100,000 residents. But this, again, is violent crime. So violent crime per 100,000 residents in the Bronx would be 800 violent crimes per 100,000. What about the numbers for Staten Island? Let's take a look. All right. Staten Island crime index, 42 out of 100. So Staten Island safer than 42% of U.S. cities. Okay. Violent crimes are obviously way less than the Bronx, but that may be explained because Staten Island has less people there. Crime rate, violent crime per capita per 1,000 residents, 3.7. So that means that per 100,000 residents, it would be 300. So the Bronx, let me just remind you here, 800 violent crimes per 100,000 or 8.5 per 1,000 residents. Staten Island, 3.7 per 1,000 residents or 300 violent crimes per 100,000 residents. In other words, Staten Island, by any measure, taking, what did Virginia Heffernan say we need to take this out of? Race, class, politics. Okay. So taking race, class, and politics out of the equation and just looking at the crime rate in Staten Island and comparing it to the Bronx. Staten Island, with 4 times the number of legal gun owners, yes, is more than twice as safe as the Bronx is, Virginia. I'm sorry that your PhD didn't help you with this, but I don't think you made the point that you're trying to make here. Because what you just proved is that, well, at least in the 5 boroughs, the more gun owners you have, it's not that violent crime goes up. It appears that violent crime actually goes down. Or maybe there's more to it. Maybe a rate of violent crime is not connected to how many legal gun owners there are in any particular city or neighborhood, which would stand to reason, since the vast majority of legal gun owners are never going to commit a crime, with a firearm or without. But this is the attitude and the mindset of the gun control advocate. It's less about public safety. I mean, they may say it is. No neighborhood should be deemed as a safe neighborhood if somebody owns an assault weapon. See, it's not about violent crime. It's really not about public safety. It's about you and I and 100 million of our fellow Americans exercising our right to keep and bear arms. That is what Virginia and her fellow gun control advocates can't stand. And the fact that more Americans are actually embracing their Second Amendment rights, the fact that in California, nearly 1 million firearms were sold last year, the fact that gun ownership among Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, women are all going up. Oh, the gun control advocates hate that. I mean, they really wish that every gun owner in the country looked like me, right? White guy, kind of pudgy, in his mid-40s, big old beard, lives in a rural area. Somebody that they could stereotype as, just some random redneck out there rootin', tootin', shooting machine, right? That's what they want. Well, I mean, personally, I don't see anything wrong with the way I look, but whatever. The fact remains that the right of the people to keep and bear arms is what we're talking about. And more people, including people who look like me and people who look nothing like me, people who think like me and people who think nothing like me, are embracing their Second Amendment rights. Now, Virginia and the other gun control advocate who might randomly still be listening to this point, if you have a problem with more Americans exercising a civil right, that makes you the problem. That makes you the bigot. That makes you the person who is standing on the steps of the schoolhouse door saying you can't come inside. The problem lies with you, not with gun owners. Certainly not with those who go through every hoop and hurdle that the state of California already places in front of citizens who are trying to exercise that fundamental right to keep and bear arms. Whether it's a ban on so-called assault weapons, whether it is a ban on so-called high-capacity magazines, whether it is a law that criminalizes purchasing ammunition out of state and bringing it back into the state of California, whether it is a law that requires a 10-day waiting period or a gun rationing law that restricts gun purchases to 1 per month. Virginia, the state of California, has almost every gun control law imaginable. And you know what? Has a violent crime rate that is roughly comparable to the state of Texas, which has almost none of the gun control laws in place in California. You want to talk about bad neighborhoods and good neighborhoods? You want to talk about making people safer? Okay. Tell you what, why don't we see about allowing those good folks in these bad neighborhoods to exercise their right to keep and bear arms? And let's see what happens. Now, again, I don't think crime would disappear, but I think those good folks in bad neighborhoods would be able to protect themselves, and that would be a damn sight better than what we have right now in California. All right, let's move on. I'm sure, the sad thing is I could do a 3-hour show talking about the lunacy from the gun control advocates in response to this decision by Judge Roger Benitez. They really have truly lost their minds over this stuff. But we will move on to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. We'll start there. Story out of Fargo, North Dakota, where 14-year-old Jupiter Paulson was murdered back on June the 4th. She was skateboarding from her dad's house to her mom's house. She was attacked, allegedly by a 23-year-old man. She was stabbed more than 20 times. And this guy, not only known to law enforcement, he was in court less than a month before this murder took place. 23-year-old Arthur Prince Colley is now facing murder charges in the death of Jupiter Paulson. But back on May the 7th, he was in court on charges for discharging a firearm within the city limits, possessing a firearm as a convicted felon, and possessing drug paraphernalia. He has previously been convicted of assault on a peace officer. So this is a violent felon found in possession of a firearm. In fact, not only found in possession of a firearm, but discharging, shooting that firearm. That incident took place in December of 2020. So he shows up in court May the 7th. He pleads guilty to these charges. And in exchange, he's sentenced to 18 months probation and 27 days in jail, which, not coincidentally, is the amount of time that he spent behind bars awaiting trial. So he was given credit for time served, and he was immediately released to the streets, where less than a month later, he allegedly used a knife to stab this 14-year-old girl more than a dozen times and in her life. Under North Dakota state law, Colley was eligible for a multi-year prison sentence for being a felon in possession of a firearm. Under U.S. federal law, Colley was eligible for a 5-year prison sentence for being a felon in possession of a firearm. Instead, he got probation. Not even 5 years. 18 months probation and credit for 27 days served in jail before he pleaded guilty to these charges. It is dumbfounding to me that we have gun control activists like Virginia Heffernan, for example, saying that, what we really need is a map to let us know where all these gun owners are. No, that's really not what we need. What we really need is a criminal justice system that is functional. That's what we need. We need a criminal justice system that doesn't result in 95% of felony cases ending in plea bargains, which is the case right now. We need a criminal justice system that can ensure that individuals like Mr. Colley spend some time behind bars as a consequence of their crimes. And again, that's not what we have right now. Not at the state level, really not even at the federal level. Not with the Biden administration in charge and Democrat-controlled states moving to make it even easier on criminals. State of New York, I wrote about this at Bearing Arms earlier today. State of New York passing a bill that would make it very easy for anyone who's the victim of a crime to sue a gun manufacturer and blame them for the actions of criminals. It's your fault that I got robbed. Even though, the gun that was used was sold legally 10 years ago, was stolen 5 years ago, it's the gun maker's fault. New York just made it very easy for people to pursue that type of litigation. At the same time, lawmakers are expected to approve in New York legislation that would make it harder to return convicted criminals to jail if they violate their probation. Yeah, go figure. Making life easy on criminals like Mr. Colley, making life harder on law-abiding gun owners like you and I. That sound like a recipe for disaster to anybody else? All right, our armed citizen story of the day from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, where 5 people were arrested after a assault victim able to protect himself by shooting one of his attackers. Now, police were originally called to investigate the shooting, but when they got out there, they realized, okay, the shooting was the response to an assault. A man was rushed to the hospital about 10:50 Saturday night after being shot on Edgewood Avenue in Atlanta. He was alert when he was taken in for treatment, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Witnesses told police that the shooter ran away from the scene shortly before officers arrived. However, upon further investigation, officers found a man near the scene who, quote, appeared to have been seriously physically assaulted. That man told officers he had been involved in an argument with another man and a group of people. As the argument escalated, the men began to physically assault him. During the assault, the victim pulled out a gun and shot one of the attackers. Investigators spoke with more witnesses, with the men involved in the alleged attack, and shortly thereafter, they arrested Leon Bowie III, Leon Bowie IV, Louis Williams, David Beckford, and Sadiq Robinson, who was identified as the man who was shot. All 5 now charged with aggravated battery and robbery. The victim of the assault taken to a hospital with multiple facial injuries. At last report listed in stable condition. And again, at last report, sounds like this was a case of self-defense and no charge are going to be expected against that individual who shot one of his 5 attackers. And by the way, 5 attackers. If you have 5 guys attacking you, do you think you might want more than 10 rounds of ammunition to defend yourself? You know, in this California gun ban case, the attorney general tried to argue, well, look, I mean, the average defensive gun use, only 2.2 rounds are ever fired. So why would anybody need more than 10 rounds? Why would anybody need a detachable magazine? Well, if you're the victim of an average attack, maybe you don't. But how can you be sure that you'll be the victim of the average attack and not an extraordinary attack in which 5 people, say, start trying to beat you into the ground? At that point, you might want more than 2.2 rounds to defend your life, don't you think? All right, I'm glad that this guy's okay. We'll give you any updates as they become available. Finally today, our good deed of the day. We'll go back to California for this one. A screenshot of a California Highway Patrol officer in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing to save the life of a choking baby on a L.A. freeway. This was Highway 101 in Woodland Hills. Officers Ramstead and Cato responding to a call of a choking baby in a car on the right shoulder of Highway 101. Officer Ramstead, who is a licensed paramedic, evaluated the infant, utilized back slaps, the California Highway Patrol says, to clear the infant's airway and begin breathing normally. The baby apparently choking on cherries, which is kind of scary. You know, it's been a while since I've had a toddler, but parenting tip from Cam. If you're feeding your kid something that is, small and easily chokeable, make sure that you're doing it in a situation where you can keep an eye on them as opposed to glancing in the rearview mirror every once in a while. Glad the baby's okay. Again, glad that officers Ramstead and Cato were in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. And we thank them both for their very good deed. Now, that is all the time we've got for you on this edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. Again, reminder, on tomorrow's program, we're going to be talking with Alex Bosco of SB Tactical about the Biden administration's new proposed rules on stabilizing braces and how they could turn millions of legally purchased firearms into potential NFA items. And that would result in a potential 10-year federal prison sentence for those who own them. Yeah, it's coming up on the next edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. Don't forget, by the way, you can check out bearingarms.com for more Second Amendment news and information throughout the day. You can also become a VIP subscriber at bearingarms.com. Just go to bearingarms.com/subscribe. Use the promo code GUNS to get 25% off of your membership. We really do appreciate your support. It helps us do this program each and every day and continue to bring you the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation. We'll see you again tomorrow, but in the meantime, be well, be safe, and be free.